Before we get into today's advanced expressions with the verb bear, let's ask Barry the bear what his favorites are. So, what's your favorite expression with the verb to bear? Hey, Barry, that's the adverb, barely, B-A-R-E-L-Y. That has nothing to do with the verb bear. And besides, we don't get into that stuff on this channel. You're on timeout. Okay, now that Barry's barely involved, it's time to move on to our real list of expressions with the verb bear. So let's first take a look at the verb bear here. The verb bear is irregular, so its form changes quite a bit. The present tense is bear or bears for the third person singular. The past tense is bore, and the past participle is borne with an E when it means carried or endured, but sometimes borne is used without an E when talking about birth. The ing form is bearing. This verb has a few different meanings, and I think these meanings are best illustrated when we look at the different expressions that use this verb. All right, let's look at our first one, bear a resemblance. This phrase means to look like someone or something. Basically, it's what you're saying when people notice a similarity, like, wow, you look just like, but in a slightly fancier or more polished way. It's the kind of expression that works in both casual and more formal situations. I've been told I bear a resemblance to 3 different people. A couple people have said that I bear a resemblance to the actor Kyle MacLachlan. 2 people have said that I look like Woody from Toy Story. And 1 person said that I look like the Muppet Guy Smiley. Maybe in a cowboy hat I could pass for Woody, but the other 2 I'm not too sure. So enough about that. Our first example sentence here says, she bears a strong resemblance to her grandmother. So perhaps when looking through old photos of grandma, you notice that she and her granddaughter look very similar. You could say bear a resemblance. The next example here is talking about things instead of people. It says, that painting bears a resemblance to her early work. Here, it's not exactly the same as the artist's previous style, but it reminds you of earlier works of art by that artist. Bear a resemblance works in both spoken and written English, but it's just a little more formal than just saying looks like. So if you want to make your observations sound really thoughtful and precise, bear a resemblance is perfect. Next here we've got bear the pain. This means to endure or put up with physical or emotional pain or suffering without giving up. So it means to keep going even when things hurt. Maybe your body hurts or your feelings or both. So our first example here says, she had to bear the pain after twisting her ankle during the game. Imagine you're in the middle of a basketball game and ouch, you twist your ankle. Your friends are shouting at you to sit down, but you're stubborn. You think, nope, I can still play. Every step hurts, but you keep going. You've got determination and you're pretty stubborn. Or take our second example, the government asks citizens to bear the pain of the economic downturn. So an economic downturn is when the economy is doing really poorly. The government told the people to stay strong and accept the difficult situation, like losing jobs, earning less money, or facing higher prices. So this phrase works in both formal and everyday English. You can use it when talking about physical pain or when talking about emotional or other struggles. It's especially useful when talking about someone's effort or determination in situations where they can't or won't give up. Next up, we've got bear the burden. And no, this isn't about carrying a bear on your back, though sometimes responsibilities can feel like that. This phrase means carrying a heavy responsibility, duty, or problem, often something that weighs on you, either emotionally or practically. So this could be something that makes you feel very sad or very worried most of the time. For example, after their father passed away, she had to bear the burden of caring for the family. So you can imagine a young woman suddenly becoming the person everyone depends on. She has to make sure everyone is taken care of, that there's food on the table, that the younger siblings' homework is done, and that bills are paid. Basically, she has to become the family manager overnight. Our next example is about small businesses. Small businesses often bear the burden of new regulations. Every time the government introduces new rules, the little shops and local companies are the ones trying their hardest to deal with the extra paperwork or compliance costs or maybe even the new fees. Meanwhile, the big corporations just pay a team of lawyers to handle it for them. The small businesses, however, they feel the weight and they have to bear it. When using this expression, keep in mind that it's common in formal and journalistic English, the English you would read in news articles or hear on the news. It's great for talking about responsibility, difficult tasks, or emotional weight. In everyday conversation, though, you might just say carry or have a lot of responsibilities instead. But using bear the burden makes it sound a lot heavier and much more serious. All right, so next here we've got a big one. That's bear the consequences. This means you had to face the results of your actions, usually the bad results. So imagine this, you cheat on a test and you bear the consequences. Maybe you thought you were being clever by looking at your neighbor's paper, but you were caught by the teacher and now you have to bear the consequences. Probably an automatic 0 for the test. Yeah, bearing the consequences isn't fun, but it's real life. Bad actions have bad consequences. FAFO, fool around and find out. Or think bigger. Leaders must bear the consequences of their decisions. Political leaders, CEOs, or even the captain of your football team, they make choices that affect a lot of people. So if things go wrong, they can't just shrug their shoulders and move on. They have to bear the consequences of their decisions. This expression works in both formal and everyday English. It's used to describe serious situations about discipline, leadership, or major decisions. But it can also be used humorously to talk about everyday choices as well. Now let's look at bear responsibility. This means to accept or carry the duty of being accountable or responsible for something. Basically, it's up to you to make sure everything gets done, gets taken care of, or gets handled properly. For example, parents bear responsibility for their children's safety. That means putting in car seats while driving, putting their heads in helmets when they get on a bike, basically being responsible and looking out and handling situations before they go badly. Another example here says, every citizen must bear responsibility for protecting the environment. That means recycling your plastics, saving energy, and not tossing your cigarette butts on the ground like I see on an almost daily basis in my city. So just know bear responsibility works in both formal and everyday English. It's great for serious discussions, essays, professional writing, or just giving advice. You can also use it in everyday life when talking about duties. All right, here's a juicy one. Bear a grudge. This means holding on to anger or resentment towards someone, like carrying around a little backpack full of bad feelings that you never ever put down. It's an expression that really captures the idea of letting something bother you for a lot longer than it should. For example, she still bears a grudge against her friend for breaking her promise. Maybe her friend said she'd come to her birthday party, but she didn't show up. Years later, every time this person sees that friend, maybe they're not even friends anymore, she gets really, really angry. That's bearing a grudge. And honestly, people who bear a grudge often struggle to move forward in life. It's like trying to run a race while dragging boulders behind you. They're heavy, they're unnecessary, and they're definitely slowing you down. Holding on to anger like that can really affect you in a negative way, especially if it lasts for years. This expression works well in both formal and written English. It's slightly more informal and conversational, and you can use it to describe situations in your personal life or to talk about any friendships that go sour. Next up here is bear pressure. This means to deal with stress or demands without falling apart. Basically, keeping your cool. So staying strong mentally and emotionally, even when the situation is intense or overwhelming. Our first example here says, he had to bear the pressure of speaking in front of thousands of listeners. Imagine stepping onto a huge stage and everyone is watching your every move. That's a lot of stress. So bear the pressure here means that he has to stay focused and confident, even if his heart is racing or his palms are sweaty. Our next example says, some jobs require you to bear pressure and stay calm under stress. Think about doctors in an emergency room, firefighters rushing into dangerous situations, or even teachers managing a class of students who are bonkers. These jobs demand that people handle tension calmly and keep making the right decisions no matter how intense the situation is. In the first example, we had bear the pressure because it refers to one specific situation, the pressure of performing in front of thousands of fans. In the second example, we said just bear pressure because it's talking more about pressure in general and not a specific or particular type. So the expression bear pressure works well in both professional and everyday situations, especially when you want to describe someone handling stress. It's slightly formal, but still natural in spoken English as well, especially when giving advice or describing challenging situations. All right, so here's a formal one. We've got bear a child, or bear twins, or triplets, or so on. This means to give birth. Yep, growing a tiny human or more and bringing them into the world. It's an expression that's quite formal and maybe a little bit old-fashioned. For example, she bore twins at the age of 30. So double the chaos and double the love. Or we got this example: in many cultures, women were expected to marry young and bear a child quickly. That's quite a bit of pressure. So using bear a child here makes the statement feel more formal and reflective rather than just saying have a baby. This expression is very formal, and in everyday English, people would usually just say have a baby. So save this expression for special occasions where you want your English to sound a little more serious. Next up, bear offspring. Fancy again, right? This is basically a very formal or scientific way to talk about giving birth, but this is more often used for animals than for people. So if you're reading a textbook or a research paper, you might come across this phrase. For example, most mammals bear offspring that need care after birth. So imagine baby lions in the savannah, tiny rabbits in a burrow, or even your neighbor's new puppy. All those little ones need feeding, protection, and lots of attention. They aren't like sea turtles, which are on their own immediately after hatching. This next example says the farmer's prize mare bore offspring that went on to become racehorses. So this proud horse gave birth to horses that were soon strong and ready enough to compete. So use bear offspring when talking formally about animals, but don't use it to talk about people. Next up here, we have bear arms. This means to carry weapons, often as a legal right or an official duty. It's a very formal expression, and you'll usually find it in history books, in legal texts, or discussions about the US Bill of Rights. For example, citizens in some countries have the right to bear arms, so these citizens are allowed to own guns. And we have this example: they were ordered to bear arms and defend the city. Here, it's about duty and responsibility. The soldiers were told to grab weapons and be ready to protect their city against attackers. All right, here's a more pleasant one. We have bear gifts. This phrase means to bring or carry presents, but it sounds a bit fancy or poetic, like something you'd read in a storybook. It gives your English a touch of elegance, so it's perfect if you're telling a story. For example, the visitors came to the house bearing gifts. They're not just dropping by for a quick hello, they're coming by with gifts. The phrase bearing gifts makes it seem like these visitors are honoring you. Or think of the classic story of the wise men. They bore gifts for the newborn king. Using bore gifts reminds us that these gifts are important, symbolic, and meaningful. This phrase is formal and poetic. In everyday English, you'd probably just say bring gifts. That's much simpler and more casual. But if you want your English to sound a little bit more story-like, then bear gifts is the perfect choice. Next up, we've got bear the name. This phrase means to carry or have a particular name. Think about it as a personal or official label, but in a fancier, more formal way. It's the kind of expression you see in writing, in articles, or in formal documents rather than in casual conversations. For example, the university bears the name of its founder, so the person who started the university. Every time someone walks through the gates or sees the logo, they're reminded of the person who started it. So this is a way of honoring their legacy and their contribution. Or picture Navy ships sailing across the ocean. Many ships bear the names of famous leaders, like the USS Theodore Roosevelt or the HMS Queen Elizabeth. These names are meant to inspire respect and admiration. So in everyday speech, you'd usually just say have the name or is called or is named after. But if you want to sound more polished, especially in writing or during a presentation, bear the name is a nice little choice. Now we've got this expression, bear fruit. It means that a plant produces fruit, apples, oranges, grapes, or whatever. But also it's a beautiful way to say that your hard work, your patience, or your effort has finally paid off. So this expression is talking about results, showing up after a long wait or steady effort. For example, the apple tree finally bore fruit after 3 years. Imagine planting a tree, watering it, and protecting it from pests, and waiting all those seasons and nothing happens, but then on the 3rd year, boom, there are apples. A nice little tasty treat for your efforts. Now let's look at our second example. It says years of training bore fruit when he won the championship. Think about those years of endless practices and maybe missed social events. All that effort finally produced the fruit of success, the win. In this sense, bear fruit is really talking about the struggle and the payoff that resulted in just a few words. So our first definition shows up when reading or talking about gardening or farming, but our second definition, like your efforts bore fruit, is fairly common in everyday English, especially in writing. You'll see it in news articles, essays, or workplace discussions when people want to sound a little bit more expressive. So when you want to talk about success that came from patience and effort, instead of just saying paid off or got results, try using the expression bear fruit. Our next expression is bear results. This means to produce an outcome, often after a lot of effort. This expression shows up when showing a connection between all the hard work you put in and the payoff or reward that eventually comes. This is unlike everyday English where people would usually just say show results or get results. The phrase bear results is a little more formal and a little more professional, so you'll see this in business reports, news articles, or in academic writing. Take our first example here. It says, the new teaching method is beginning to bear results. Picture a classroom where the teacher has tried something new. At first, nobody knows if it's really working, but then after a few weeks or months, the students start improving. Test scores go up and confidence builds. That's when people can finally say, aha, this method is bearing results. Now our second example here says, his persistence eventually bore results in the form of a promotion. Here we have someone who didn't give up. He was persistent. It might have seemed like nobody noticed at first, but persistence has a way of paying off. Finally, the reward comes. He gets promoted. That's the result his efforts bore. Whenever you want to emphasize the effort, patience, or persistence finally producing something valuable, you can use the expression bear results. Our next expression is cannot bear to do something. Now, this phrase means unable to tolerate or endure something, usually because it's too painful, too upsetting, or just too unpleasant. It's not about physical strength like carrying a piano up a flight of stairs, but more like the emotions or situations that feel overwhelming. And this expression is very common in everyday English when people are talking about their feelings. Let's look at our first example. It says, I can't bear to say goodbye to my best friend. This isn't just, I don't want to say goodbye. It shows the depth of the feeling. Maybe the friend is moving away. Maybe they won't see each other for a long time. This expression cannot bear to tells us that the goodbye feels like it hurts too much emotionally. Now our second example here is, he couldn't bear to listen to the sad news any longer. Imagine someone hearing really bad news, maybe on the radio, maybe in a hospital, or maybe just in a conversation, and it gets too much. Maybe he turns away, covers his ears, or walks out of the room because the news is so terrible. So whenever you want to show that something is not just bad or unpleasant, but really emotionally difficult, cannot bear to is a phrase you can use. Next up, we've got bear in mind. Now, this is one of those expressions you'll hear all the time, and it basically means remember or keep this in your head. This phrase is polite and very natural in both spoken and written English. It's just a little more formal than simply saying remember. So use this when you want to sound considerate, respectful, or professional. Think of bear in mind as the kind of phrase you'd use when giving advice, offering a reminder, or pointing out a detail someone shouldn't forget. For example, your teacher might say, please bear in mind that the test will start at 9 a.m. sharp. In other words, don't be late. Putting sharp after a time means exactly, at exactly 9 a.m. or 9 a.m. sharp. Our second example here says, if you're thinking about investing your money, you should bear in mind that markets can be unpredictable. One day you're up, the next day you're way down. This is the kind of phrase you'll see in financial advice, articles, or maybe from a friend who's just trying to warn you. It's not just saying remember, it's saying keep this fact in your brain, it's important. So when you want to sound thoughtful and give someone a gentle reminder, bear in mind is a very useful phrase when you want to say, hey, don't forget this little detail. It might save you later. Our next expression is bear the brunt of something. Now, this means to suffer the worst part of something unpleasant. You'll see this a lot in newspapers or in formal reports. It has a very serious tone, and in casual, everyday English, people would usually just say, got the worst of it instead. But using this expression, bear the brunt, makes the suffering or the destruction sound more dramatic. For example, the small town bore the brunt of the storm. Imagine the scene: a storm sweeps across an area, while the bigger city maybe gets heavy rain. This little town gets completely devastated. Maybe homes are destroyed and streets turn into rivers. If you read this in a news article, bore the brunt tells you instantly that this town didn't just get hit by this storm, it got hit the hardest. Or let's switch to a workplace setting. Imagine a big project at a company. Things look promising at first, but everything went completely sideways. In the end, it just failed. Like in this example, she bore the brunt of the criticism after the project failed. Maybe she was the team leader, so even though the whole team had a hand in the disaster, she's the one who got all the angry emails and her boss breathing down her neck. She's bearing the brunt of the criticism and taking the heaviest hit, while the others escape with much less. Moving on to our next one, we've got the idiom grin and bear it. You'll hear it in all kinds of everyday conversations. It's a little informal, but it's certainly not rude, and it means to accept an unpleasant situation without complaining. Basically, you smile, that's the grin part, and you endure it, that's the bear part. People often use this when giving advice, especially if situations can't be changed. Our first example here says, he didn't like the long meetings, but he had to grin and bear it. And yeah, I think most people can relate to this one because meetings, especially those long, endless ones, are just a fact of life for most workplaces. You don't have the power to make them shorter, so your only option is to sit there, smile politely, and wait for it to finally be over. Our second example here says, she can't stand her English class, but she'll have to grin and bear it until the end of the semester. In this case, she doesn't really have a choice. Maybe she needs this class to graduate, so the best advice someone could give her is to just grin and bear it. Basically, suffer through it and put up with it for now because it'll be over soon and you can move on. So this is a useful idiom you can pull out and use when you or someone else has to deal with something unpleasant, but there's really no way around it. For practice, be sure to make your own original sentences with any of these new expressions in the comments. I check every one of them. And if you found this video helpful, be sure to hit those outstanding like and subscribe buttons. See you in the future.